Jonathan, if you want to kick off.
Yeah, of course. So welcome. My name is Jonathan Males, and along with Catherine and William, we run Metsana Partners, and I'm pleased to say that we're joined today by John Anderson, who's one of our core consultant team as well. So good to have you all on the call. Just by way of welcome, it's clear that we are really living in ridiculously strange times at the moment. One of the strange things is I can't make the slide move to get that to go forward. Thank you, Catherine. And one of the things I think that strike us at the moment is that the role of leadership has never been more important than it is right now. We're having to learn to adapt, to evolve, to deal with situations which are highly unusual. But there's never been a more important time for leaders to step up, because the very survival of our businesses, our teams, our people, and even the planet seems to be at stake right now. And our real strong view is that if we each do what we can within our sphere of influence, then we'll learn, adapt, and eventually we're going to thrive again. And the reason I can say that with confidence is that that's what the human species has been doing for about 50,000 years. And we've always, as human beings, had really difficult situations, challenging times to deal with. This happens to be the one that we're dealing with right now, and happens to be one that everyone on the planet is dealing with. So the purpose of this webinar today is to help leaders understand and respond to the challenges of leading their people through this time of crisis. And as performance psychologists, we want to bring a particular slant to that. Between us, we've got experience at about 15 Olympic Games and Paralympic Games. We're used to working with people in high pressure situations, and we're used to helping leaders lead in those types of situations as well. So the agenda for today, we're going to start by sharing some principles for leading in a complex world, because some of the rules are different here from business as usual. So we want to give you an idea of what that's all about. We then want to talk about the psychology of crisis and what that means for humans in terms of how we respond to threat, what that means for us as leaders. And then finally, really importantly, the role of self-care. We think from a leadership point of view, this is a really critical aspect of what's needed today. And we're going to leave time for some questions and comments at the end. If there is something that comes to mind as you go through, feel free to put it into the chat. But we also will have time at the end of the call to hear your feedback. And if you're not on mute at the moment, could I ask you to put yourself on mute just to sort of save background noise? So let's kick off then. If you haven't heard of the acronym VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, then you need no more than look out the front door at the moment. We're living in a VUCA world, which means that things are different. The way we need to lead is different. I'm just trying to get that slide up. And this is uncharted territory for many people, and for many leaders who are outside a comfort zone, and new rules need to apply. So we need to understand that that context is different from normal. And in a VUCA context, when it's uncertain like this, it's about navigating. It's about trying things out, experimenting, taking a course, seeing if it works, and then continuing with it. It's not about simply being able to lay out a grand plan with certainty, know what's going to happen. So in this sort of context, it's really important to aim for your best, not for being perfect. Whatever standards you're able to achieve, whatever standards your team or your organisation was able to achieve in the past, recognise that you may need to take that into account now. So it's not a matter of letting standards slip, but knowing that you can simply aim for your best. And to do that, just taking one day at a time and focus on what is known right now is a really helpful step. And we believe it's really important that as leaders, you have both a business plan in terms of business continuity, how you're going to keep your customers happy, how you're going to manage your cash flow, look after your supply chain, but also that you have a psychological game plan. You have something clear about how you're going to manage yourself and how you're going to manage your teams, because we're all human beings in this. And as human beings, we're going to respond in a very particular way. So to go into that in a little bit more detail, let's look at what happens. What's the psychology of people in a crisis situation? Well, for a start, Abraham Maslow, a psychologist many years ago, said that there's a hierarchy of needs. Not all needs are equal, and we need to have our basic physiological needs met first. We need food, water, sex, and sleep. Then we need to feel safe. Once we feel safe, then we can have our needs met for friendship and family and intimacy. And when those needs are met, then we can look for self-esteem, confidence, and then beyond that, we can go towards self-actualization. Now, whether it's as hierarchical as this or not, right now, a lot of people are not feeling safe. And they're not feeling safe because, for very good reason, their health and their financial security are under threat. So it's a very normal and natural response when people feel that their jobs are on the line, when they feel that their companies might be going bankrupt. It's natural to feel threatened. That's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of mental health. It's not a sign of anything, excuse me, other than being a human being responding to a situation like this. So it's important to recognize that. There are other things at risk at the moment from a psychological point of view. And a great acronym is SCARF. This comes from a writer called David Rock, which we like a lot. And he talks about 5 principles or 5 psychological needs, which are really key to us. And when any of these are threatened, we respond with fear, anxiety, being unsettled. The first of those is status. We all need to feel important to some extent. And living in today's world, working from home, means that I've heard from many people, their status is under threat. They don't feel as important as they used to because they're not putting on their suit and their shiny black shoes and going into the big office. So for some people, that is a really critical factor, and a perceived lack of status will be deeply unsettling. The next one is a big one, that's certainty. We all need to know what's going to be happening. We vary in how important that is. Some people are very comfortable with the taking as it comes, being emergent, seeing what's going to happen. Other people need real clarity and a plan laid out before them. But right now, we're all in a situation of high uncertainty. And that is deeply unsettling. And sadly, there's not much we can do about it right now because we're all in that and no one's got a great master plan that's going to get through it. Autonomy refers to how much control you have. And again, you can feel at the moment like we have less control, certainly in a situation of lockdown where we're told where we can go or where we can't go, who we can see or who we can't see, means that our level of control is much less than it usually is. In a strange way, for some people, they may feel more in control at the moment because if they're working at home, they may have more control than they usually do over when they do their work or what they wear. So that might be a bit more mixed for some people. Relatedness means your connection with other people. When relatedness is under threat, we feel distant from people or we're worried about getting into conflict. It's a strange one at the moment because clearly direct physical contact is limited at the moment. We can't be with people in the way we were before. But I'm hearing a lot of people say that they've never communicated as much as they have with their teams. So it's a funny one at the moment. Fairness is a real spike. There's something about the human brain that's wired for fairness and particularly for unfairness. So if we find ourselves in a situation that feels unfair, it creates a huge threat response. And in many ways, I can recognize this myself. I can find it easy to feel that this whole situation's unfair. Why now? Why me? Why us? Why does it have to be happening now? It's just not fair. So while that's not necessarily rational, it does lead to some more psychological unrest and at worst anxiety. So what this means is that when any of these needs are threatened, we typically respond by either fight or flight. We either try and get away, avoid it, or we charge headlong into it and try and batter our way out. And our role as leaders is to understand that, to understand that as human beings, we're really in a difficult situation right now, and different people will respond in different ways because those 5 needs are not equal for everyone. We feel different people will feel different levels of safety or not. So everyone we work with is going to be in a slightly different situation because their world has been rocked in a slightly different way. We need to understand that and encourage people to understand that there is a third way, that we don't have to respond by flight or flight, that we can learn to manage and acknowledge those emotions, and we can still engage that very clever part of our brain that's evolved in humans, which allows us to plan, to be calm, to be rational, and to be resilient and resourceful. Just to bring this to life a little bit in terms of how it shows up, I think a typical fight response we've seen in recent weeks has been panic buying, elbowing your way through the queues to get the last of the hand sanitizer or the toilet roll. I think is an example of a fight response when people feel unsettled. And certainly less so now, perhaps, because we've all been locked down, but the whole denial it's a problem. Putting your head in the sand, it's going to be okay, it's just like a flu, we're overreacting. I think it is actually still a response to uncertainty and the threat, but it's pretending that it's not there. So, given that's what's happening, given that as human beings we're deeply unsettled at the moment, safety and basic needs are under threat, excuse me, what does that mean for us as leaders? So we're going to focus on a couple of the key needs here and look at what as leaders we can do to help people cope in this sort of situation. And I want to look at certainty first of all, because when times are uncertain, as Simon and Garfunkel said, we all want to bridge over troubled waters. We want someone to take us over the unknown, over the fog, over the swamp, and deliver us safely on the other side. And wouldn't that be lovely? Wouldn't it be beautiful? If someone could say to us, if Boris Johnson could say with absolute truth, this will be over in 12 weeks, and we believed him and it was true. Beautiful. Or Donald Trump would say this is going to be over by Easter. When leaders say things like that, they're responding to their own need for certainty, and they're also responding to the need that they pick up from the people around them, that they want an answer. Everyone would like to know what the answer is. Everyone would like to know how long this is going to take, what the answer is going to be, what the world's going to be like when we're through all this. But I think that this is a real temptation that as leaders we've got to resist doing, because it's actually, I think, pretty much impossible to really give people long-term certainty at the moment. We can give people long-term hope that this is going to end, but to really paint a picture, say, this is what it's going to be like and this is the bridge over and how we're going to get there, I think is the wrong strategy right now. I think far better is to take a different approach, and rather than think of a suspension bridge, think about creating stepping stones. Focus on short steps that are practical, that are safe. Where can I put my foot next that's going to take me, that's going to take my weight? Let's take that step. And let's know, and let's, with our best guess, know that that stepping stone is going in the right direction. As best we know, given in a VUCA world, we need to navigate. We're going to take steps, each one at a time, heading us in the direction which we believe is best. And if it's not, we'll redirect, we'll step back, and we'll re-aim. So be careful about promising a grand vision and providing certainty where actually that's unrealistic and people will just end up disappointed. I'm going to hand over to Catherine now, and Catherine's going to pick up on some of the other core needs that are under threat at the moment.
Thank you, Jonathan. So the second really core need that's under threat right now is relatedness or connection. So this is a really vital one. So human beings are tribal beings. We're pack animals. We need to connect with others. Isolation, medium to long term, is a really damaging thing for us as humans. So yeah, as leaders, a primary part of what we should be thinking and doing right now is to try and create this culture of high connectedness within our business. So make it a number one part of your job. And we've spoken to many leaders in the last 10 days who said, gosh, I seem to be spending a disproportionate amount of my time connecting with people, running team huddles, team meetings, checking up and checking in with people. And the response here is, yes, that's part of your job right now. In fact, it's a primary part of your job right now. Expect it and shift your mindset towards it. So as leaders, think about, how can you, begin to create that culture? Can you role model high connectedness with your team and with those that you lead? Ask and support your leaders, your managers to build that sense of connectedness within their team. So it's a really kind of core part of what you should be thinking about and focusing on right now across your business. The third need that is under threat right now is autonomy, and particularly I know we've got some people in Australia on the line as well, but in the UK, that's been That's been a big feature of our lives for the last week since we went into lockdown. We may have further restrictions on our autonomy and our freedom of movement in the coming weeks. Some people may feel this more keenly than others. As Jonathan said, other people may actually find that they have a higher sense of control. They have more choice in how they work, in particular, the timetable they keep, how they manage their day, etc. Some core things to think about in terms of helping fuel people's sense of control and autonomy at this time. First one, there's this adage which you've probably heard of before, which is control the controllables. And that is very simply focus on what you can control and don't waste time and energy on the stuff that you can't control. And again, thinking as leaders, encouraging people to do that, spend energy, spend time on the controllables, and don't waste time on the stuff that we can't control. In all of this, we have retained autonomy. We still have freedom and choice, and we need to highlight that. And we need to be very careful here that we give as much autonomy and control to people at the moment, particularly with how they go about implementing decisions and actions, and of course in how they work, how they manage their work day and work week. And that's obviously critical at the moment, where we have different responsibilities around childcare and care of relatives, etc. And it's good to be aware that this lockdown might trigger real anxiety in some, and I think as leaders we need to appreciate that, understand that, but potentially also be ready to be able to support people with really kind of persistent anxiety, and be equipped to be able to do that, and think about, is our business equipped to be able to do that? Moving on then, kind of just to summarize this piece, and then I want to pick up on a couple of areas here. So the number one thing I think as leaders that we need to do is to create very short-term certainty. As Jonathan says, it's stepping stones, not suspension bridges, and clarity. And I'm going to pick up on clarity in just a moment, but the old saying, communicate, 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 has never been so important. If we think we're communicating a lot right now, we'd encourage you to dial that up even more. One of the things just to be aware of is that when people are under stress, when they're anxious, they don't listen as much, or they don't take on board information. So our ability to take on board and process information is narrowed. So as leaders, keep communicating, particularly in a period where there are daily changes. That's been particularly true over the last 10 days. Hopefully now we're entering into a period of relative stability, but even so, kind of daily briefings, daily communication is important, both in terms of kind of keeping people up to date with changes, but also just reinforcing the messages. Repeat messages is key at this point. Think about how you show up as leaders. Jonathan will pick this up in a moment, but the shadow you cast is a long one across your business. So role model how a reassuring, calm, confident demeanor right now. If you are not in this state, if you are emotional, if you're tired in particular, it will show up in how you interact, it'll show up in how you talk, it'll show up in the language you use. So we'd encourage you to pay real attention and be very aware of this right now. The third point is try and get this the balance right between we've got a collective responsibility. We all need to step up to make this work, to ensure business continuity and ensure that we have a sustainable business for the future. So ask. In times of crisis, people are good at stepping up. We've seen that right now. We've seen that in terms of kind of government appeals to, for example, volunteering. There's been a collective mass stepping up of people. People in our businesses are ready and are able to step up in general. So ask people to step up, ask them to step up together, but at the same time, message that, we are confident that we will get through this together if we work together on it. So it's that fine balance in how you communicate around that, and within that communication, it's being accepting this is a current reality, but we have hope and confidence for the future. I'm going to pick up on a couple of key bits here that we think are important for leaders of businesses right now. And the first one is around clarity. So communication is important, but communication with clarity is absolutely key here. And if you've been in the UK over the last week or 10 days, you'll have seen different instances where the clarity of communication, clarity in particular around restrictions at the moment, has not been quite there, and we've seen the impact of that in terms of how people follow that and the policing of that and so on. So clarity is all important. So there's 4 parts of this. So your people need to have a really clear understanding of the situation. We'd advise you, to provide them with as much information as possible. Don't sugarcoat it, but at the same time provide an undertone of confidence and reassurance, so that again it's that getting that balance of giving people the facts, but also clearly stating that we have confidence and hope for the future. So an understanding of the situation is number 1. An understanding of where we're trying to go, so what we are trying to achieve, and what we're doing to achieve that as well at senior level. So the decisions we're making, the planning that's occurring at senior level, that's also key. So an understanding of what we're trying to achieve and what we're doing to do that. Clear understanding of what matters most now, and again that needs to be short-term, certain and concrete. And the 4th bit is being very clear about what you need from them to achieve that, so their part in achieving that. So 4 parts of creating clear and unambiguous communication across the business. And then the final bit that's really important right now is how we make decisions. So the ability to make fast, best decisions with the information that we've got available is absolutely crucial right now. And that decision making is not unilateral, but nor is it consensus decision making. There is a certain kind of art and process to good decision making right now. So the number 1 step here is making sure that you have, the richest, the most complete, the most up-to-date information to make decisions. If you are a sizable business, or even if you're a medium-sized business, you might consider having a specialized COVID intel team that can disseminate, distill external information, so government changes, policies, etc., as well as mine internal information and intel from within the business. So you may consider that, and that their role as a small group is just to provide, really complete and objective information through to the ExCo or decision-making team. So make sure that you have complete, rich, and most up-to-date information available to make decisions. Create alignment on your priorities as a senior leadership team. Once you've done that and decided a course of action, then create that shared understanding. So it's back to that clarity piece that we just covered earlier. And then trust people close to the action to implement the decision. So it's back to the autonomy. So really resist the temptation to be too command and control or prescriptive. So make the high level decisions based on your priorities, based on your intent, based on where we are and where we want to go short term. And then give autonomy and trust to those people to implement those actions and the decisions. And lastly, final point, and really important here, and sometimes the one in a high-paced, high-velocity environment that gets forgotten, is that we're in a period of rich learning. So we know that as human beings, when we're most under pressure, we're most stretched, or most outside of our comfort zone, that one of our richest periods of development and learning. And right now we're in a period where we have the opportunity to develop, to learn individually and collectively. And we'd really encourage you to grasp that, in amongst a time of, we're all working hard, we're all in reactive mode, and we're all operating the best we can. But taking time to keep a diary, for example, keep a logbook of of how you're feeling, what's happening, decisions you're making, what you're learning about yourself, and as a team collectively doing that as well. So even if you take half an hour at the end of the week on a Friday afternoon as a leadership team, just taking time to check back in on the week. What's happened? How do we make decisions? What did we get right? What did we do well? What's the stuff that we need to change for next week? And keep, rather than just having discussion, write it down. That will be your legacy of learning that you can then use to build on your team performance, your leadership team performance. So I'm going to pass you back to Jonathan, and Jonathan, will you pick up on just one final piece before we wrap up?
Thanks, Catherine. So I want to talk a little bit about the importance of self-care as the foundation for really effective leadership at the moment. And this is something we all know about, because every time we get on an aeroplane, which is this activity we used to do in the past, in case you've forgotten, what were we told as part of the emergency briefing? When oxygen's needed, fit your own mask first before you try and help other people. And this is such an important principle here. It can feel easy. You can be drawn into wanting to be the savior of your team, savior of your company, believe that if you work 22 hours a day, you're going to get through this. That is a fallacy. If you don't look after yourself, you're going to have a negative effect on the people around you. So it's really super important to do that. And what does that mean? Well, as I think Catherine mentioned before, the reason this is important is that your mood casts a long shadow over your organisation. People will pick up on how you're feeling, whether that's in a video call or a phone call, by the tone of your voice, even by reading how you've written an email. People will pick up on how you are. And in organisations, we take our own emotional tone from the most senior person around. So if the most senior person around is stressed, exhausted and anxious, guess what? That's the mood that permeates through the organisation. If the most senior person in the organisation is being calm, is doing their best to be resourceful, is being realistic about the situation, is looking after themselves, guess what? That's the mood that will pick up from across the organisation. So really important. You've got a responsibility here. So critical amongst that is to acknowledge and manage your own emotions. This doesn't mean that you just stifle them or ignore how you're feeling, but it means that you pay attention to those natural emotions and deal with them effectively. Use them as fuel. Use them as information about what's going on rather than being driven by them. It's really important to establish your own self-care routine. Make sure you build in some time to exercise every day. Watch your diet, watch what you eat and drink. Set a good role model here to make sure that you're looking after yourself. And finally, check where your support is. At the best of times, it can feel lonely as a leader. I think right now it's probably even worse. So check that your own support network is in place, whether that's family, whether that's peers, whether that's a coach. In these times, anxiety is really coming through as an issue. We're going to run some specific sessions on anxiety first aid next week, so look out for that. But to really keep it simple, I think there are 3 things we can all do to reduce anxiety. So in terms of self-management, this is what you can apply to yourself, and it's also something you can encourage others to apply as well. So 3 things: be present, be grateful, and be of service. Be present is important because anxiety is an emotion. If you ask why do human beings have the emotion of anxiety, it's a threat detector. It's like a radar screen or a smoke detector. It tells us that something bad might happen that's not immediately visible. It tells us about a future threat. If we face a current real threat, if something dangerous is right in front of me now, my emotion is not anxiety. My emotion might be fear. My emotion might be determination. It might be something like that. But if a real threat is in front of me, I do not feel anxious, because that's not what anxiety is for. Anxiety is a detector for a remote threat. So if you're feeling overly anxious, a really simple thing to test is to be present and ask yourself, right, what's happening right here and right now? Is there a real threat to me in my immediate environment? If I look around the room am I sitting in right now, is there anything right now that's a threat towards me? And if there is, then please do something about it. Do not leave yourself in a dangerous situation. But if you look around right now and you notice and just take a moment to realize, actually, right now I'm sitting in my office. Right now I can see the books, I can see the picture on the wall. Right now, there's actually nothing that's threatened towards me. That's a relief. There might be things out in the world I need to deal with. There might be things in the future I need to deal with, yes. But right now, in this moment, there's nothing threatening to me. Good to acknowledge that. Be grateful. In these times, it's really easy for us to get sucked into noticing what we don't have, to start regretting the missed opportunities, to start missing the lack of travel or the work opportunities that have gone or the people I'm not seeing. Turn that around and just be grateful. Remember who and what you've got in your life right now that you feel grateful for. And even taking a couple of seconds, I invite you to do this right now for 3 seconds. Bring to mind something or someone that you feel grateful for right now, and just notice what that's like. Final thing is to be of service. Anxiety makes us more and more self-obsessed. We can get caught up in our own head, our own worries, our own concerns about our own health or what's going on. So simply to shift perspective and say, how can I help someone else right now? Let me get out of my own head or my own concerns. What can I or what can we do as a team or as a company to help someone else? Let's be of service. It's a beautiful antidote. So there's 3 very simple tactics: be present, be grateful, and be of service. Okay, so some final thoughts. If we try and distill the last 35 minutes into 3 points, this is what we've come up with. The first thing is control the controllables. Focus on the things that you can control, that you can influence, the levers that you can pull, and do your very best to influence those things as constructively as you can. Second point is to manage yourself. You cast a long shadow, manage yourself. And the third point is trust in your team. This is not a time for solo heroics. I'm not sure there ever was a time for solo heroics, but this is certainly not it. This is a time to be drawing on the strengths of your team, to be collaborating, engaging, bringing the best out of everyone around you. So that's the content we wanted to cover. Thank you so much. We'd like to open it up now and would love to hear any feedback you've got. It's always helpful for us to hear what's landed, what aspects you found particularly useful. And you may, of course, have a question that you'd like to explore as well. So if you'd like to ask a question, just take yourself off mute and we'll hear from you.
Hello, it's Laurie Williams.
Hello, Laurie.
Hi, it was just a comment really, just to say that I found that really helpful. Not least because I think you've just described all the emotions that are going around my organisation at the moment. So that's there's a certain level of security and certainty for me in knowing that it's the same everywhere else. So that's helpful. We've got an executive board meeting this morning, and I think I'm going to spend some time reminding my executive board colleagues of some of this stuff, I think, because we're very people orientated, but some of our people aren't particularly acting in character at the moment, and I think it brings rise to a certain level of frustration. And so I think it would be good for us to pause and spend a bit of time reflecting, I think.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
And we're going to explain in a moment how you can get hold of these materials as well, so you'll certainly be able to get hold of them shortly. Any other feedback or comments?
Just to say thank you from me, actually, it was really useful. I particularly loved the stepping stone analogy. I'm sort of one for wanting to do the suspension bridge. You know, I have taken on board, I've worked with Catherine before, you know, I understand the need to course correct, but that analogy really, really landed with me. So I wanted to just say thank you. I thought it was fantastic. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I've written a little blog about it on LinkedIn, so I'll put that in the chat room and send it out. So if you want a written version of that.
That would be great. Thank you very much. Really useful.
Stephen here. Maybe talk a little bit. I thought the point on clarity was really important, and I think in this new world where we kind of jump from Zoom call to Zoom call, sometimes you just don't have that time to reset yourself for the next meeting. So I find inside the organisation, there's lots of communication, and almost everyone said over communicate, and that's fine. But I think with that, people are probably not pausing to actually say, well, what are we actually going to discuss in this meeting? We'll have lots of communication, but where's the clarity? And I think as you jump between meetings, and maybe you're jumping from one meeting where you are a subordinate to one meeting where you're a leader, they're different meetings and different times. And I think as I reflect on the last couple of weeks, that's probably something where I think, well, getting the clarity and understanding what role you're actually playing in that meeting is important. Because in a normal world, you don't really jump from meeting to meeting. You sort of go back to your office, you sort of go through reception. Whereas in this new Zoom world of meetings, it's just meeting to meeting in some occasions. And I just don't think it probably, unless you think more actively about it, you don't deliver that level of clarity.
It's a great point, Stephen, and you know, I often make the joke that most organisations run on this sort of fallacy of time travel, which allows no time to get from a meeting ends at 10 and the next one starts at 10, and you can get to a different office or different part of the building in that time. Well, I guess Zoom makes that possible because you can go from meeting to meeting in zero time. I think the other thing I'd say, we encourage a particular format for teams around communication, and that's to have three things that they talk about. What? So what's the bit of content or what's the bit of information that's important to us now? So what? How does that apply to us? What do we as a team now do with that in our particular context? And then now what? What's the specific action that each of us needs to take as a result of this conversation? And that's a framework which I think means that the communication goes from a one-way cascade where you're just receiving, and it gives teams a much more agile framework to process and digest information and lead it towards action. We're big fans of not just talk, but actually extracting something from a conversation and doing something with it.
Right, thank you.
Great. Well, any other comments? Otherwise, we'll move on. That's great. Thank you so much. So if you would like a copy of the materials we've used today, if you would like to put your name and email address into the chat box, we'll do two things. We'll make sure that you get further updates from us because we're running more webinars like this. There's some more on Thursday. We're looking at different aspects of leadership and how that changes over time, leading emotionally through time, through this difficult situation. And then next week, we're going to be running some sessions on anxiety first aid. So going much more into the detail of how you and the people around you can reduce and manage the level of anxiety that you're feeling. So as I said, if you would like to receive those materials, just drop your name into the chat box with email. Good. Catherine, anything else from you before we finish?
No, I think you've wrapped up nicely, Jonathan. So thank you very much for joining everybody. Really nice to see a couple of old friends and colleagues join us today as well. So thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Go well.
Goodbye.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thanks, Jonathan and Catherine. Yeah, really professional, really helpful. Thank you.
Do you want to stay a moment, John?
Yeah, can do. Yeah,
Just-
thank you.
Just thought it'd be nice to connect briefly, and yeah, I think it's just the four of us now.
Yeah,
Catherine.
you had me.
Catherine, if you
Had
stop
me-
recording.
When Jonathan was doing